Tim Miller, we're going to talk in a little bit about how this administration managed to lose a trade war, but I want you to take a listen to Senator Tim Scott. He was pressed on Trump's broken promises about lowering costs. This is on Meet the Press. He tried to fall back on blaming President Biden. Take a listen.
Let's look back at the original sin of cost in America in the last 8 years. It goes to Joe Biden, who took inflation up 21%.
President Trump has been in office for 2 years. When President Trump took office, inflation was at 3%. It's now at 3.4%. Gas prices are over $4 a gallon, up over $1 from a year ago.
Good news is you don't disagree with the fact that Joe Biden brought 21% extra cost on the American families. We do
but
agree
we're not talking about Joe Biden, though. The Biden administration is over. This is the Trump. We're 2 years into the Trump administration.
It's a contrast, Kristen. At the end of the day, the American people need to see the contrast.
I'm not sure what that contrast is supposed to be, Tim Miller, and it's as though Republicans are shocked to learn that they're in charge, not just of the White House, but both chambers of Congress. I just wonder how much more difficult it gets for Tim Scott and others to continue trying to sell that message when you have Collins, when you have candidates in Montana and in Nebraska saying what this administration is doing is hurting not just Americans, but our own electoral chances.
Yeah, look, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place on their messaging because the facts are bad, right? I mean, a lot of times in political commentary, we go to, well, how is their messaging doing? Well, you can't sell bad news, and you can only do so much to shine that turd, if you will. And so, look, I mean, Tim Scott is trying the approach of look over there at Joe Biden. That's not going to work. That's never worked for any president in history who's tried to blame their predecessor for their own failings. But I think he feels like it's the best he's got to work with. I was interested over the weekend, and I saw Tom Cotton, senator from Arkansas, who has been lockstep with Trump on everything, over the past decade. He criticized Trump's move on the beef imports because they're, the ranchers in Arkansas are concerned about beef, and beef prices are hitting people so hard. The fact that Tom Cotton spoke out to try to distance himself from Trump, this is a different strategy than the Tim Scott strategy, I think tells you a lot. And there was a poll that showed his opponent, who's a farmer, Hallie Schaffner. One poll showed her beating him. I think it's going to be really hard for the Democrats to win Arkansas, obviously. But like the fact that Tom Cotton feels like he has to distance himself from Trump's management of his trade war and of the economy, particularly in farm country, I think is pretty telling about how bad their political prospects are, particularly in that community.
So, Eddie, you can shine the turd to pick up on my friend Tim Miller's eloquent language there.
Sorry
you can
about
also
that.
I know, I loved it. Thank you. I needed to wake up, and I so appreciate that. There's that, and then there's deflection. That's what Texas Governor Greg Abbott is trying. He was on ABC, and he was asked to grade the president on prices. Take a listen to what he said.
We are providing answers and solutions to our fellow Texans that don't have anything to do whatsoever with what's going on in Washington, D.C.
So what grade would you give him?
Depends on what category you're
I
talking
said about keeping prices low.
Well, listen, we all need to have prices lowered, especially at the price of the pump. And I think the president is on a track to get us there.
Do you still think gas will be below $2 a gallon by the end of the summer?
If the president maintains the current trajectory that he's on right now, they should be, and let me explain why. And that's because the kinetic battle with regard to Iran appears to be over.
Professor Glaude, you were in the business of giving out grades. That was someone who very much did not want to say it is very obvious that this president deserves an F, maybe a D+. You tried, but you still failed. I just wonder how long they can keep telling the American people that the Iran war is over and that the price impact is going to go away any day now before people start being insulted that this administration thinks they're stupid.
Absolutely. I would write on Governor Abbott's paper, come see me, not I wouldn't give him a grade. So I think it's really important. Tim said something that's really important. Facts are bad, but facts are also stubborn. There's a sense in which the American people are struggling every single day. They're confronting high prices at the gas pump and the grocery store. And, the idea of a trade policy that's going to benefit everyday ordinary folk, given what people are experiencing on the ground, this seems to be far-fetched. This seems to be fantasy land. So Republicans who are running for office are confronting everyday ordinary folk who are finding it difficult to live their lives and to take care of their kids and to keep a roof over their home, over their heads and the like. So those facts are stubborn. And even though we're paying attention to the political horse race, Alicia, the fact that everyday ordinary folk are experiencing and encountering the difficulties in their day-to-day lives run up against, right, the ways in which they're trying to sell this. And I think that's really, really important as we think about the politics of this current season.
Right. So let's get back to what Americans want to be doing right now, which is some hot dogs, some hamburgers, and then you have Trump struggling to contain surging beef prices. He announced 300,000 tons of ground beef are going to be imported without tariffs. Isn't, Bharat, that an acknowledgement that tariffs do raise prices?
Yeah, of course. And remember, the entire theory by which tariffs are supposed to be helpful to the United States is that they're supposed to raise the cost of imports. The idea is that by raising the cost of imported goods, it creates an incentive for people to build more in the United States and purchase more American-made goods. But this specific situation really gets to the rock and hard place that Trump is in, because once you decide to lower tariffs as an effort to reduce costs for Americans, the producers in the United States who are being protected by those tariffs are going to revolt. And you're seeing that now with the farmers and ranchers who make domestic beef, and all of the representatives, including Republican representatives from the states that have a lot of those ranchers, are outwardly criticizing Trump for this move. And so once you've chosen this path, again, you go back to the original sin of all of this is Liberation Day, the idea that coming into office at a time when the cost of living is the number one priority by far for the American people, and deciding that's the right moment to launch a massive tariff-based trade war, which is going to raise costs for Americans, you can see why the American public is giving Trump such low marks on the economy, because they rightly perceive that he's not even trying to address the number one concern that they have, and is in fact many ways making it much, much worse.
Just to get a fuller picture of this, Tim, one of our colleagues traveled to Iowa, spoke with some cattle farmers there. Here's what they told us.
It's ridiculous that we have taken now, the time when so many farmers are under economic stress, to make it easier for a product to come into our country that our farmers want to grow, to bring more product from overseas. That's not what consumers want, and it doesn't help our farmers at all. In fact, it puts us at a huge disadvantage. It's a huge move in the wrong direction.
I'm biting the bullet. I'm cutting down everywhere I can. I'm reducing my expenses. I went to no-till farming, which means fewer trips back and forth across the field with machinery. That's one good way, but now that I'm already doing no-till farming, what is there left for me to cut back?
So I get that he wants to get through midterms ostensibly, but with absolutely no regard for the long tail of this, Tim, and what that means for generations of farmers, of cattle ranchers.
Yeah, look, I think Trump in the first term, his tariffs really hurt farm country. And how did he solve that? Well, he just bailed them all out because they're a key base of his, using money from those of us who pay taxes in other industries, right? And he basically just took money from working people in other industries and did a cash transfer to farmers to deal with the consequences of his dumb trade war in the first term. This time, the trade war was bigger, and because of what's happening with Iran and other issues with the economy, he wasn't able to do that. Like, he wasn't able to put a Band-Aid on the problem that he solved by just bailing out the farmers with farm welfare. And so what you're seeing is really the economy is not great everywhere, particularly for working people, as Eddie pointed out. The economy is the worst in the rural parts of America right now. And I think that there's going to be real political ramifications for that. If you look at kind of these stretch Senate seats that the Democrats need to win, if they want to get a real majority next year, you're looking at places like Iowa, Nebraska, maybe even Kansas. They have a great candidate in Kansas, Pastor Adam Hamilton. And I think that Trump is, has caused himself a lot of political damage in these states. And a lot of places where they voted for Democrats not that long ago. And it's in our lifetimes, our adult life, the Democrats had Senate candidates in some of these places, Iowa, South Dakota, et cetera. So I think it's a real political issue for him.
I'm just struck time and time again, Eddie, by like how the fact there's like no coherent theory here of the case. It's not even right. There's a theory, it's not working, or there's a theory and we all disagree with it. It is simply scattershot. It would seem even that this sort of like command economics that the president is engaging here is reminiscent of the socialism that he is constantly trying to call out.
Yeah, I like that word, command economics. That's really, really important as a description. But, we think about it. I mean, is there coherence? No, because it's dumb. It's just dumb on its face. And then you think about it, right? You think about the difficulty that farmers are confronting with screwworm that's hit beef supply. You think about what's the consequences of the Strait of Hormuz, his war of choice around fertilizers and the way that's happening. You think about Americans experiencing the difficulty of living their day-to-day lives. We can't get a hold of beef. The lettuce will mess up our stomachs. The eggs may kill us. What the hell is going on? And so we could talk about it in terms of politics, but I'm just thinking about the day-to-day lives of everyday ordinary people that flow from the policy decisions, from the nonsense, the idiocy that's coming out of the White House in Washington, D.C. right now.